So the if statement is just kind of like, in a sense, a native method of Java. So remember how all methods have parentheses on them? Just like the string length method, the square root method in the math class, the next int method that we've learned about from the scanner class. When you use this if statement, it's very similar. It's like a method. It has a purpose. It has parameters that we're going to put in here inside these parentheses. But you don't have to reference it. You don't have to say what class it came from. You can just use it at any time you want. And you might notice how it brought up kind of this like blue section of font here, this background. That's just something that BlueJ does to kind of catch your eye. If you've ever programmed in Blockly or Scratch, it's like we're creating a block of code when we create an if statement. So that might be something that you've seen before. All right, so the way this works is inside the if statement, the parameter setting is Boolean. So you must provide a Boolean value inside your if statement to make it work. Now, if you were to just put the word true there, then what would happen is whatever the next line of code is would execute, okay? But in your if statement, if you put the word false, then the next line of code would not execute. All right, and that's the basic idea. So when you put an if statement in, you have to put a Boolean condition, and if it's true, then the next line of code executes as normal. If it's false, then the next line of code does not execute. Now, that's kind of silly. Why would you just type true or false in? I mean, if you want the line of code to execute, just write it. If you don't write it. So we don't usually just write true or false there, okay? Instead, what we would normally do is put like some kind of question in there that we don't know the answer to. Now, like if we had a scanner set up, for example, which I'm not going to take the time for that right now, maybe there'd be like a user input. But just for the purpose of this, I'm just going to make like a couple of ints. So I'll just make like an x integer of, say, let's make it like kind of like an imaginary test score, like a 97, for example. All right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if x is greater than or equal to, let's say, 95, we'll print on the screen, so system out print, you got an A+. Okay, so awesome. All right, and so the way this works is, like I said, you must put a Boolean logical condition in here, which we have. The computer's going to check that Boolean condition to see if it's true or if it's false. And if it's true, the very next line of code will execute, okay? Which in this case is a print statement, and it's going to print on the screen. All right, so let's just try it. Let's see what happens. Okay, sure enough, it prints you got an A+ because x was greater than or equal to 95. What if you got an 87 on your test? All right, so now if we run this, okay, it's kind of weird. Watch what happens. Nothing's going to happen. So I run my program, nothing happens. Notice that the bar is not stuck on red like we saw the other day. There was no pop-up window because basically once that if statement became false, this just got skipped. The computer doesn't even read that line of code. And as far as it's concerned, your program's done and there was nothing to do. There wasn't even a print statement. Okay? Now, you know, you could put something else down here, like you could say system out print goodbye, and that would print, okay? Because this line of code is not linked to the if statement. All right? By default, the if statement links itself to the very first semicolon that it encounters. So the word goodbye actually prints here, even though our if statement is false, because again, the if statement, its default setting is to just go and search for the very next semicolon, and it wants to attach itself to that And then if that's its linked statement, it's either going to do that statement or it's not. Now, typically, like if you look at what other programmers do, typically when they write an if statement, they like to hit enter and tab and write it as more of a block style of code, okay? Now, it's all the same thing. The computer doesn't care. As far as the computer's concerned, this is a single line of code until it reaches that semicolon, okay? Now, I encourage you to write enter tab, because that's the way it's done. That's the industry standard. You don't want to write code that looks stupid to other people, right? They'll think you're not smart. So we want to work this way too. But as far as the computer's concerned, it doesn't matter. All right, and these tabs are meaningless, and so sometimes students think that the tabs matter, and that, for instance, like if they write code like this, I've seen students think, oh, well, now both of those things are linked to the if statement, but no, they're not. Okay, just that first semicolon is linked to the if. So right now, even though I've moved some things around and I hit tab, it wouldn't actually matter. It's still going to print the word goodbye on the screen, even though my if statement is failing, okay? Because it's just linked to that very first semicolon. All right, so if I wanted both of those things to link to my if, there is a way to do it. And the way you do it is with a system of braces. So if you put a set of braces immediately after your if and before the first semicolon is encountered, now both of these statements are going to be linked to that if statement, okay? So for example, like instead of saying goodbye, let's put right here, let's put like good job, all right? So if somebody gets an A+, we're going to congratulate them. And then I'm going to put another print statement down here. I'll put it back to goodbye, okay? So right now, the way I have this set up, one of two things is going to happen. I'm either going to print all of this stuff, or I'm just going to print the word goodbye. And it's dependent on whether or not that if statement kicks in. So right now, the if statement's going to fail, so the computer will skip both lines of print, okay? Not just the first one, it's going to skip both of them. But it will still print goodbye, because that's not part of our link. That's not part of our if statement. Okay, so right now, the word goodbye printed, but nothing else. If I change this x value back up to a number larger than 95 or equal to, now we'll see all three things print. Okay, so notice how both of those print statements were linked to the if. When the if failed, both print statements failed. And again, that's because of how I used that brace structure. Okay, that caused multiple statements. Normally it's just one. If you want more than one thing linked to that if, you have to brace it.